never be alone. So come away with me, nobody has to know where we gonna go.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So it's been a hot minute, not gonna lie, and I'll save the long backstory for another day, but today I want to explore iPhone filmmaking, specifically how it is to actually use this device as a replacement for a more professional camera setup. Everything you just saw at the start of this video was captured on an iPhone 13 Pro with some Sandmarc accessories, and I want to run you through the process of what it was like to actually film and then edit these clips, telling you all my learnings along the way. I've also got some tips for making your footage look better in post-production towards the end of this video. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Quattro and I'm a cinematographer down here in Melbourne, Australia, running a video production business. As a part of my work, I'm using professional cameras day in and day out. So how does the iPhone hold up in comparison? Well, let's find out. Now, I've been trying to prove the iPhone is a viable filmmaking tool for years now. In fact, in 2018, I was using the iPhone 10 and DJI Osmo gimbal to capture clips and using these to teach people how to edit in iMovie. Back then, this all still felt new and developing, and the mere fact these videos were usable at all felt like a win. But now in 2024, we're up to the iPhone 15 Pro, which on the video side now includes a flat color profile called Apple Log and the ability to record to external SSDs. These are all welcome additions, however, while the quality has definitely improved, many of my original issues with using an iPhone as a video camera still remain. Now, I want to be clear up front as well. In terms of capturing content, we all know the iPhone, or any smartphone really, is great at just being quick and easy to use. For TikTok or Instagram, it's perfect for making videos feel real and in the moment. In fact, I've literally been losing some work because clients would prefer to pay content creators to film with their phones because it looks more authentic than using a professional camera and lighting setup. However, that's not what we're talking about here. I'm much more interested in the filmmaking and storytelling side, where your camera is a tool which allows you to capture a scene in a very thoughtful way and hopefully achieve your desired outcome. Apple loves to tout the iPhone as a viable camera, literally using it to record their presentations these days. However, I always like to point out Apple has a lot more on their side compared to most of us. First of all, a massive crew with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, plus their set is literally $1 billion campus in California, a state known for how it's always sunny. And that doesn't include how many people would be involved in the post-production side to refine all of this too. My issue with this marketing exercise is while it's impressive an iPhone can capture an Apple event and make it look decent, once you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more to make this video, spending a little bit more to rent an ARRI camera instead of an iPhone seems obvious. In fact, it might actually reduce the workload on set and make post-production easier and less involved for everyone. Basically, you'd be saving money by using another camera rather than an iPhone. However, what about the rest of us who don't have massive budgets and have this device with us at all times? Could this be a viable camera replacement? That's what I wanted to figure out once and for all. Although that sounds a bit clickbaity, and to be honest, it definitely isn't. So Sandmarc did send me some accessories, which became the reason behind this video. However, as usual, they didn't pay me and don't get to see this before it comes out. This video isn't even really about these accessories, it's more about my gripes with the iPhone. But touching on them briefly because I use them for the opening shots, Sandmarc sent me their cloud filter and also their 6x telephoto lens. The cloud filter is somewhat similar to what's called a black pro mist filter in the industry and reduces contrast in your image while blooming the highlights. Given the iPhone has more limited dynamic range, I was hoping this would reduce some of the harsh transitions from dark to light. They give you both a 1/8 and quarter strength in the carrying case, and I'd recommend the quarter when using the wide lens. The effect is still quite subtle, but you can see it, and I especially like it when there's a direct light source in frame, something the iPhone definitely struggles with. The telephoto lens I didn't expect to receive, but this is actually a solid piece of kit. It comes in a really nice travel case, and you can even use the cloud filter with it using the included ring. I found this is actually much nicer because the effect of the cloud filter is enhanced on a longer focal length. But to use all of this, you'll need a case to screw it onto. Sandmarc sent me both their regular and pro cases, with the latter being so much better overall. It's made of a softer rubber material and is MagSafe compatible, which feels nice and premium. However, ironically for my shoot, I had to use the regular case because the pro case wouldn't allow me to attach my HDMI adapter because the port opening was too small. This was slightly unfortunate because the regular case feels very plastic and cheap in comparison. Going back to the telephoto accessory, I screwed this onto the wide lens, effectively making my iPhone go from a 26mm equivalent focal length to around 150mm. You can definitely notice some amount of light loss as well as a warm color shift, but I'd expect this given we're putting glass on top of glass. The benefit here is we're getting to use the iPhone's strongest camera, the wide lens, rather than the built-in telephoto, which can't absorb as much light and often gives me subpar results on my iPhone 13 Pro. The downside, however, is you've now got two focusing mechanisms to worry about. What I did for my shots is set the telephoto lens to infinity focus and then manually adjusted the focus from the Blackmagic camera app. Now, you shouldn't need to do this all the time, but I found occasionally the iPhone would get confused on where to focus and start pulsing, and because I was filming myself, I needed to make sure it didn't do that. The next part of my setup gets pretty crazy. Usually when filming myself, I might use the Sony app on my phone to monitor the shot, but now my phone was the camera. Plus, I'm using the back lenses, so I can't really see what's in frame. I use my Axon transmitter kit with the Blackmagic app on the iPhone to send out a clean feed to my monitor, and was able to use the Tilter Nucleus Nano to manually adjust the focus wirelessly and start recording. This was a great solution, but not super practical to do with every shoot. Ideally, you wouldn't be filming yourself and you'd be able to monitor from the back of the phone or an attached monitor instead. As I mentioned, the iPhone is a challenge camera. It's trying to be so many different things to different people, and I always find myself getting frustrated. My best analogy is it's like a guitar that's always trying to be in tune as you play. But sometimes you just want to try something new or just have the feedback when something isn't working. However, because the iPhone is so aggressively tuned to try and keep everything exposed, I really dislike how it's challenging to create shape and contrast in my shots. The smaller sensor also means it struggles greatly in low light, and everything appears overly sharpened as well. Even all these iPhone generations later, what we really have is an issue with physics that I can't see being solved anytime soon. Then there's the practical issues, which might sound silly, but hear me out. As I'm setting up shots, I'm usually listening to music on my phone, and I can't do that when my phone is the camera. I already mentioned I can't monitor myself remotely like I would when using a mirrorless camera, or reference off my notes if I was talking to camera like I am now. The iPhone is such a versatile tool to have on set, but it seems to make way more sense in your hand than on a tripod when it becomes inaccessible to you. Of course, if you only have a phone, this should never be an excuse for not being able to tell your story, because as Apple and others have already proved, you can get good results from this camera, but you need to work for it, and that's my issue. When the shoot becomes about making sure the camera isn't falling apart, you're probably focused on the wrong thing. Decent mirrorless cameras are also quite accessible these days and might actually cost you less depending on what iPhone model you go for. Having said that, if you're traveling and you want to pack light, it might make sense to only bring your phone. That's what my friend did on his recent Europe trip, and he's been uploading these beautiful vlogs of his adventures. This is where I could see the iPhone making sense, and potentially these Sandmarc accessories too. Okay, so I don't want to end without giving you some practical tips on how to make your iPhone look better in post-production. So let's jump into Resolve, and I'll show you what I did for my video to make it look the best it possibly could. All right, so now we're in Resolve, and I want to take you through a couple of key things to look out for when you're grading iPhone footage, a couple of the things you'll run into as key issues and how to fix them. Also have to say, I'm sitting in a very bright room at the moment. It's sunny outside, there's a big light in my face, my TV's blocked so I can't see a reference preview. So I'm gonna do my best. I can't really see a whole lot at the moment, but I'm gonna try. Starting with this clip here. So this clip, as you can see, is basically a clip of the water running in a creek. And as you can see, these are very simple grades as well. I didn't want to overcomplicate this. This is just a YouTube video to demonstrate the iPhone plus the Sandmarc filters. And I felt like if I did way too much to the image, obviously I'd be sort of pulling away from, you know, the whole intention of this, which is to sort of showcase how the iPhone works. So as a filmmaking tool. So what I've done is I've done some basic grading. You can kind of see just, what do you call it, a node tree. There's a few nodes there. If I bypass all the grades, this is what we're looking at. So quite a bit different. Basically what I've done to start off with, I'll take you through just this grade. So level is probably the most important, right? The iPhone lifts everything. The iPhone wants everything to be exposed and everything to be in good exposure. So it does this thing where it's always trying to put the whole image in the middle, which is not very great. So what I end up doing is adding a bit of contrast, reducing the shadows, trying to even out that image a little bit, make it a little bit more. There's deeper blacks. In terms of brights, highlights, there's usually enough in the highlights there, but definitely just reducing it down a little, adding some contrast, especially in the lower end, is really important. So I've done that at the start there. If I go over to the next node, I've added some color boost in this case. Again, haven't played with colors too much. I've just sort of increased the saturation a little bit. Heading over, this is probably the biggest thing that I want to talk about is with the iPhone, the annoying thing is you are locked to an f1.7 aperture, at least on the iPhone 13 Pro. I don't know about all the other iPhones. So the iPhone, you're always going to be f1.7. And that's quite annoying because if you want to capture something that's in quite bright light, the only way you have to do that is either add an ND filter onto your camera, which I've done a review of the Sandmarc ND filter in the past, which is great, but you can't stack these filters, right? With the Sandmarc system anyway, and it kind of makes sense. The ND filter is variable, so you can't change you can't put a variable filter on top of another filter, which means that you're kind of in this position where you have to choose either a cloud filter or you have to choose the ND filter. In this case, obviously, we've chosen the cloud filter, so we've had to shoot at a very, very fast shutter angle. And as a result, without motion blur, we get this really intense kind of motion across the screen. We can see that the water's dancing quite a lot, and it's not very pleasing to the eyes. At least to me, I really struggle when I see things with high shutter speeds. It's locks into my brain really quickly, and it feels, I don't know, it feels a bit cheaper these days. It feels like a lot of people who don't have access to an ND filter or who aren't shooting at the correct shutter speed, they go straight to just sort of cranking the shutter up in order to get the correct exposure. And I always prefer seeing the proper motion blur for that sort of, that sort of scene or whatever the frame rate is set to. So I've added some motion blur here, which you can kind of see. I think it does a great job. I really appreciate how Resolve now has motion blur here, as it's really quick and easy to use plugin. Anyone who's used After Effects before will know that you can add motion blur and it is a killer on your CPU or GPU. And this seems to work really well in Resolve, very quick. So I definitely recommend if you've got iPhone footage that has quite intense motion, just adding the motion blur is just gonna help soften it a little and make it feel like it was shot at the correct shutter speed, even when it wasn't. So this is the next clip I wanna focus on. And the reason I bring up this clip is because of a couple reasons. I actually really liked this shot as a composition, and I think the iPhone kind of ruined it in a lot of ways. Number one, I would say when you're shooting on iPhone and you've got a scene with a lot of small details, grass blades, tree leaves, clouds in the background with intricate patterns, I tend to find that the iPhone over sharpens everything. And that's not a nice look. I don't appreciate the over sharpening. But even worse in this case, we've got a direct light source, which is kind of hitting our tree there. And it's blown out. And if we play through the shot, you can kind of see there's this moving lens reflection as well, this like lens flare kind of thing. I'm told this is to do with, or I'm of the understanding that it has to do with the lens elements and the stabilization elements on the iPhone camera system that causes this. Anyone who shoots at night will be very familiar on an iPhone seeing these sort of reflections and how annoying they can be. There's nothing you can really do about them, to be honest, because it just is what it is. I've obviously got the cloud filter on top here to soften out that light source a little, that direct light source. You're still going to get the lens flare. But I wanted to see and include this to sort of show you a couple of ways we can maybe recover this image in a little bit, and make it better at least. So first things first, we want to soften the amount of detail on here because I feel as though the sharpening is too much for me. So what I generally tend to do is I tend to reduce the mid detail in this. So I'll just sort of disable and re-enable it. It really softens out the image, and I think it makes it much more pleasing to look at than a really over sharpened image. So that's number one, is sort of adding some mid detail. Next, I just obviously adjusted some levels and I sort of gave it some more contrast. This is quite contrasty, but again, sometimes I can't help myself, to be honest. I know I've put a cloud filter on it to reduce the contrast, but I wanted to make it a little bit poppy in basically with everything else in the scene. The next part is actually adjusting some highlights. So I'll put this in the full viewer. So you can kind of see I've really softened it out. I know this is kind of cheating, right? Because I'm using the cloud filter, right? Already to soften some of those highlights, but it just wasn't enough. The poor cloud filter cannot compete against how sharp this iPhone is making some of those transitions from dark to light. So what I've actually done is I've just highlighted, I've isolated, qualified those highlights, and then added a Gaussian blur. And that's basically allowed me to soften this out even more and just make it a little bit more pleasing to the eye. And then I believe our last note is probably just a vignette. So if I just turn that one on as well, this is kind of like our before and after on this image. And I think it just turned out a lot nicer. So again, reducing mid detail and also going ahead and maybe qualifying those highlights and blurring them out even more just to create a bit more softness in that image. Still not the most pleasing thing in the world. Could have done better with a different camera, but it's the best we can do. So what do you think? Are you someone who uses your iPhone exclusively for filmmaking or photography? Let me know in the comments down below because I am so keen to hear. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.